Welcome to Doctrine and Devotion, a podcast exploring Christian faith and practice from a Reformed Baptist perspective. My name is Joe Thorne. I'm the lead pastor of Redeemer Fellowship in St. Charles, Illinois.
And I'm Jimmy Fowler, executive pastor at Redeemer Fellowship.
What's going on, man?
Oh, man, this is good. Well, we're recording with Tom Ascol.
We just got done recording an hour-long conversation with Tom Ascol, one of the guys behind the Statement on Social Justice, the Statement on the Gospel and Social Justice.
Yeah, something like that. So, we had some questions for him. He gave some pushback. We
ultimately, what we really want to
critiqued a few things.
What we want to do is, and we're trying to have a couple of these follow-ups on the statement. We want to give people room to talk. We want to try to understand, right? So you guys know, if you listen to our episode, we're not signing that statement. We don't like the idea of signatures being affixed to it. We think that, by attaching the signatures to it, it becomes more of a, pick a side. And I don't know that it helps in conversation to have the statement.
Yeah.
But the statement itself is generating a lot of attention and some conversations and a lot of stupid things being said on both sides as well.
Yeah.
So we wanted to say, let's talk with, who's the most gracious guy?
Who's the most chill?
And it happens to be a guy that we know. So
Joe,
I know, I've known him for years.
Known him really close, and other people
you don't know him
online were like, since you guys are so close.
I know, yeah.
Which we talk about that with Tom.
Yeah. All right. So, we actually had the conversation. Here it is. You get to enjoy it. Some of you might not think that we said enough or did enough, but we don't really care what you think.
This is our podcast.
It's our podcast.
All right, Ed Stetzer.
So here's the thing. We had a really good conversation. Tom is a brother. We love him. We know him.
Yeah.
I know his heart. I know his life. So
he's chill.
He's chill, he ain't all aggro. So here is our discussion with Pastor Tom on the Statement on Social Justice and the Gospel. We get to hear his perspective, and he interacts with some of our questions and concerns. We hope that it is beneficial to you, and we hope that you will have that kind of an approach to this issue, that you're willing to listen and talk and not be embarrassed or afraid to say what it is that you actually think.
Absolutely.
Enjoy.
Well,
Pastor Tom, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to Jimmy and I about the
emphasis
statement.
on Jimmy first.
Yep, Jimmy and I. That's just the polite way that you do it, Jimmy.
Always at the beginning.
We're
isn't it Jimmy and me though?
Jimmy having a conversation with me. It would be Jimmy and me. Yeah. So thanks for correcting my grammar, Tom.
Thank you so much, Tom. This is worth it.
This is starting off great.
Everything.
We had disagreements before,
but find a comma in there to criticize.
Did you like my little observation on the Oxford comma? Come on, you liked that, didn't you?
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that was good.
They didn't have Brian Malcolm editing that document.
No, they
would not. He would not have missed that.
Nope.
All right, so Tom. Well, first of all, you're down in Florida. What's the weather like going on right now? How are you guys doing?
Oh yeah, the hurricane.
Yeah, it's hot and wet, and the hurricane is not affecting us.
Oh, all right then.
Oh,
so it's just north
President
of you.
Trump was right. It's going to get wetter.
Yeah, it got really wet and hot.
And hot.
Yeah.
Man,
so there you go.
Our president's on top.
He's a meteorologist.
Well, we can't tell any difference down here. That's the way it is during the.
I'm glad
4 or 5 months of the summer.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
we're
man.
glad
Sounds
that you
wonderful.
guys are safe. And again, thanks for taking time to talk to us about the statement, and not just about the statement on social justice, but also on the impact and the response, because that's really what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
When we saw that this was coming out, and of course Jimmy and I saw it through you because you're one of the guys that we read a lot and we tend to pay attention to you. We were immediately interested and intrigued, and then we each read it separately.
Yeah.
But we each thought,
it's about to go down.
Somebody gonna get mad. Somebody gonna get mad. So in this thing, in this statement, you address your concerns in the preface, right? Like what led you to write it.
Right.
Now, for you personally, where were you seeing those dangers that you talk about manifest themselves among evangelicals and among Southern Baptists in particular? So maybe you could just, for our listeners, highlight what some of those dangers are that you guys are seeing and where you saw them, and maybe even give some examples. You don't have to name a person, that's fine with us, but maybe give some examples of where you see those dangers happening among us.
Yeah. Would it be okay, Joe, if I gave you a little bit of background history of how all this came on my radar?
Permission granted.
Jimmy gives you permission. It's legit.
Okay. Uh, yeah, it was probably, I don't know, year and a half ago that, I began to hear things from different sectors, stuff I was reading online that just sounded odd to me. I wasn't paying a lot of attention until I did an interview with Colin Hansen, probably in August a year ago or something like that, maybe July. And we just talked about the Young Restless Reform movement, among other things. And then I don't even know if this was recorded. I don't think it was, but I asked him, well, man, what do you see coming? What are your hopes here for the next few years? And Colin, in the midst of answering that statement, made a comment that just stuck with me. He said, I don't know that this movement can survive what's coming in public theology. And I began to chew on that a little bit in the weeks after that talk and started listening more attentively for what he might be referring to. And he mentioned several issues that were related to that. So I don't know when it was, but a few months after that, I'm reading, I'm listening, and Tim Keller put up a tweet that said something like this. I used to have it memorized, but it's close to this, that the gospel is not primarily about social justice. It's primarily about God reconciling sinners to himself in Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Remember that?
Yes, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, I read it. I thought, yeah, amen. Okay. And then I saw that thing blow up and people got on there and he tried to defend himself. He said, I've said primarily. I said primarily.
even that's pretty, I wouldn't even say primarily, and I won't sign the statement. And I wouldn't even say, I would just say the gospel isn't about social justice. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I mean, it was mind boggling to me. And so, these people just wouldn't let him up. And he finally just quit, or it seemed like that. He quit responding online. And I'm looking at this thinking, this is bizarre. How did we get here? If you're going to take Tim Keller to task for a comment like that.
The most congenial, socially aware dude among evangelicals, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he makes guys like me mad sometimes. Stuff he says and doesn't say. But I was blown away. So that alerted me. And then in the aftermath of that, there were some efforts to try to shed more light. Jonathan Lehman wrote what I thought was a very helpful article at TGC. It's trying to show that what Keller said is right, which, again, I'm thinking, why do we have to defend this? But that article got more just an onslaught of criticism. And in reading through the criticisms, Anthony Bradley, who's up at King's College, he's a Westminster guy. He made the comment, said, here's the truth. It's going to be hard for you to accept, but evangelicalism has never had the gospel. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, now that I read that just like a couple of days after R.C. Sproul died. And, I went to Sproul's funeral and I'm thinking to myself, there are people who have at least academic credentials that have been in sectors of respectability that are making comments like this, and people were jumping all over it.
This is what's weird, though, Tom, is I've never known Anthony Bradley to ever say anything controversial or use hyperbole. I mean, that's weird that he would say something so crazy. I mean, because are you sure it was Anthony Bradley?
Yeah, Tom, I don't think you can't see Joe, but there's a tongue in his cheek.
Well, no doubt. Like I actually really enjoyed reading Anthony Bradley, and I even told him that's the first time I met him in person. I said, I love reading you because you always make me angry. But I oftentimes learn something, so it's good. But I oftentimes really disagree. So yeah, I can imagine that would not only get your attention, but leave in a sense like a theological mark on you that you're or an itch or a scratch or something, right?
Absolutely. And then from him I got to reading some of Eric Mason's stuff online and. We've used his book on manhood and love it, and it's been helpful.
Oh, yeah.
But
Eric's a friend.
Reading it on this stuff was just alarming to me. So that's when I began to try to broaden out a little bit more and listen and read more carefully. And it was after that, then the MLK conference came along.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I listened to some stuff on that. In fact, before the MLK conference, I talked to some friends that are connected with TGC or RLC, just saying, how are you going to do this? How are you going to have a conference in the name of a man who, from every honest assessment, denied essential doctrines of the faith? Even late in his life, I've read the arguments that said no, he came back to the faith of his fathers, and they're unconvincing. And then also was well known, at least in his inner circle, to be a man of very poor sexual morality.
Right.
And even according to his dearest buddy and Ralph Abernathy, the night before he was assassinated, abused a woman because of their sexual liaison. So how are you going to do that? And the response was, well, we're just going to look narrowly at his work as a civil rights leader, which I praise God for MLK and how God used him. There's no doubt about that. But it just seems strange to me for evangelical organizations to host a conference in his name. And so, but the answer was, we're a little concerned, and we're not sure, but we're trying to just focus on these things. And I thought, okay, I'll give you that. But then these same groups are coming out and they are just castigating Roy Moore, and they've been castigating Donald Trump, neither of which I'm a fanboy of. Okay, but why can't? It looks like different weights and measures are being used. And so that alarmed me as well, just seeing how that whole thing played out, and then hearing about the Revoice Conference and the fact that Nate Collins is the brainchild of that. And, Nate was teaching at Southern Seminary in New Testament as an instructor, as I understand it, up until this last spring.
Yeah, I don't know about the Revoice. I'm not as familiar with the Revoice. I mean, I've listened to some of the back and forth, but I'm not really familiar with it.
Well, it was hosted by a PCA church in St. Louis, and it basically, I don't remember their tagline now, but it was basically trying to argue or provide, comfort or instruction for those who identify as LBGT and maybe plus, I'm not sure about that. We're helping them to see that they can be Christians with that kind of identity, and that if you live a celibate life, which is at least I think what they call, I don't know if it's side A or side B, but they refer to both sides. One of them is where you have the inclinations, the desires, the proclivities, the orientation, but you don't act on it physically. And then the other side is you have those orientations and you go ahead and act on it, but nevertheless, you can still be a Christian. And so they're promoting this in the PCA. They're promoting this with a guy who, until recently was teaching at our flagship institution, the SBC, and got a PhD from there. And as I've heard him say on an interview, has held these views for not just the last 6 months or a year or two, but for years and years, maybe a decade, I think is what he said. And so I'm thinking, what is going on? And then I began to read articles. I listened to some interviews with guys that are in our institutions, and it just was bizarre. One of the things that was concerning to me was an article that Jarvis Williams from Southern Seminary wrote about intersectionality, where he's promoting it, that this is a great tool to use to think about life. And he applied it to himself, that, as a black man who's lived his life mostly in white spaces in the evangelical world and in the Reformed world, that he is marginalized because he's black, but he's not as marginalized as someone who's a black woman, and I'm thinking, this guy's got a PhD. He's teaching at Southern Seminary, and he counts himself marginalized. There's more to this, and so he's promoting intersectionality, while at the same time, Denny Burke, who also teaches at Southern or Boyce, has written articles against intersectionality, warning us of the poison that it is that's coming into our churches. And so all of that combined, was kind of brewing in me, and I'm trying to figure it out. Some of my closest friends on earth, pastor friends, minister friends, I'm talking to about it. They don't see it. Some of them think I'm crazy, and I'm just not sure. But I can't be convinced that I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. And, so that's how it all started with me. Those are kind of some of the immediate signs that led me into this personally.
Well, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm concerned about is, like one example that you gave is, an SBC entity putting on an MLK 50 conference, doing that, knowing that Martin Luther King Jr. Was not an evangelical, gospel believing man in the way that we are, and was had was a sexually immoral man. And like I actually that I understand. I would have the same concerns if we're having a theological conference, not just a conference on a social issue, but a theological conference. Invoking that name, I think, does raise some legitimate concerns. But this goes both ways, right? So I mean, we have to acknowledge a guy like MLK and acknowledge what he did that was good. What is he known for? And that's the primary thing we do need to focus on, I think. But we need to be honest about his shortcomings. And the same applies to our white theological heroes, right? That many of them they got the gospel right. But they really didn't really get the race issue right. Many of them were either racist, or they embraced slavery, and so forth. So like both sides are actually addressing, kind of pointing at different characters or leaders in the past and saying, well, you hold this guy up as a leader, but what about this problem that he had? And I think we all need to be honest, right, across the board. Like, hey, our people, the people that we're looking to among evangelicals, had sin issues that we need to address and be honest, and not just promote hagiography.
Exactly.
And it would certainly apply with the social justice thing.
But Joe, the way you just framed that argument is not the way that it is being popularly and forcefully framed.
Oh no, I know
by some on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
because you said these white guys that are dead certainly got the gospel right. Well, that is being rejected now. They never had the gospel because they were wrong on race, because they either advocated or tolerated or personally participated in slavery. And if that's the case, they could not have had the gospel. That's what's being said.
Right. I would be willing to debate anybody on that point. And again, like I would want to be sensitive to the issue, but you got to define what the gospel is. And it's like defining mission. You got to be ruthlessly biblical and clear, and go from there. Listen, we have to be willing to say that whether it's Machen or Whitfield or Edwards or whatever, and say like, oh, they had some glaring errors in their theology.
Absolutely,
probably worse than most of us do in terms of the degree of heinousness, right? And
I'm not willing to say that.
I am,
because I don't know where mine are.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm certainly not saying
100 years.
Give it 100 years. We're probably all a little too cold and indifferent to the abortion issue. I think that's probably fair to say.
Exactly.
But boy, the impact of owning slaves, for example, is pretty significant. So fair point there. But so I do think we need to clarify. Like, listen, there's a difference between a corrupt theology and broken aspects of our doctrine and a denial of the gospel itself. But definitely there's a big difference there.
And I think I don't know, Tom, I don't know if you had the opportunity to see Dr. Mohler's chapel.
I did. Yes, I did.
And I think he kind of tried framing it in that way as well when he's talking about social justice. Are we talking about, getting this right as a prerequisite, prerequisite fruit or a sign of salvation? And I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. And I was very grateful for the way Dr. Mohler spoke about those things. And that is what is needed. That is what was not happening 2 months ago. And so I'm very grateful for that. That's the whole point and purpose of this statement, is to start making some boundaries and calling for clarity on what we mean.
So this is something that, we because we hadn't had a chance to talk to. It came out, and we're recording podcasts all the time. Some unhappy dude sent us an email about, why haven't you had Tom on? You claim he's a friend. Well, you claim he's a friend. Why didn't you have Tom on? I'm like, well, dude, it just came out.
I know exactly. And I know, Tom, you and I have gone, was it 10, 15, 20 years back?
Oh, stop it.
You
don't know.
We
Tom
first
doesn't
wrote
even know your last name.
Our first book
I
together.
don't know who you are.
And I just, I value our friendship,
Did
Tom.
you edit?
I'll see you next week.
Did you edit his critique of traditionalism? Was that you, Jimmy?
Did I edit his critique?
Yeah.
Oh, come on. I don't really edit, Tom.
You pretty much ghostwrote
I
that thing.
affirm and help, prop
You
him up.
shaped. Okay. What were we talking about, Jimmy?
I was talking about how much Tom loves me,
No, I
and he
forgot.
invited me down.
You
for the
started
weekend.
going off again, and like this guy's like, why didn't you talk? Well, give us a chance. We actually listen. We are people that believe in conversation. I talk to everybody. Jimmy and I talk to gays, unbelievers, gays, Arminians, Catholic.
Don't let BJ Smalls know that.
Well, we don't talk to him because Tijuana Smalls is a hateful dude, but. Everybody else, we enjoy talking to, especially if we disagree, because we actually believe in the value of changing our mind. Like, listen, if I'm wrong, I want to change my mind.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you're willing to talk to anybody makes me feel very special.
Well, technically, we're only willing to talk to you because Johnny Mac was busy. No, we did call him. He couldn't do it.
We tried.
And
Vadi turned us down.
Vadi said no. Bice was like, I don't trust you guys.
Juicy Boosie
said no. So you
were fourth or fifth on the list.
Yeah, sorry, man.
Hey, man, look, I don't mind playing second fiddle. Most of the time, I'm not even in the orchestra. So that's fine with me.
So one of the things here that you've mentioned in our conversation is the rationale behind writing this thing. Like, what was your personal motive? Like, I'm sure it's a diverse group of it's a super diverse group of white men. So I'm going to treat you as
not
one.
Just white men.
Voddie's on there, right? So
and Craig Mitchell.
So white men and two black.
Wait.
No, listen, don't interrupt my narrative. I'm trying to spin a narrative here, Tom.
No. This is no spin zone. No spin zone.
Right, go ahead.
All right. We had a bunch of old white men, right, that have crafted this article. No, so like that's the
How
kind
do you
of.
know some of them weren't identifying as women?
Oh, see, I know, I do.
Tom.
Yeah, you never know with John. So.
Oh no!
So what I'm saying is, that's how a lot of people are looking at this. They look at it. They look at the group, and they go, they all have the same same motive, same whatever. And so I'm sure that there is a lot of overlap. But for you personally, why did you think this was so important to put out there? In terms of, let me ask it this way. What was your motive and your hope? And
like
really,
that.
the key idea is hope. What was your hope in writing that statement and helping to craft that statement?
Yeah, well, my hope was that it would cause some folks to stop and consider what is being said, how it's being said, and whether or not the direction that many of those driving the conversation are taking is healthy. And I believe it's not. Yeah.
Okay, good. And so, and is it fair to say that, in your, you were hoping that this would be profitable for everyone? I think people look at this and I've actually got some questions about the way it's presented that I'd like you to interact with. But was it your hope and to what degree did you believe that it would actually be a helpful conversation starter?
Yeah, well, I hoped it would be, and I believed that it would be as well, at least with some people that I was already in conversation with.
Okay.
Because these were the kinds of things that we were talking about. And whenever I would say, some just basic thing like, this is the gospel, that's not the gospel. And they would say, well, duh, we all believe that. And I would say, but look at what this thought leader is saying.
Right.
Or look at what this thought leader let be said without comment. Or these types of things, and so my fear was that we are assuming a lot that we can no longer afford to assume in this sociological, theological climate. I think we have got to come back and say, here are the borders, and we can go this far, no further.
I have one more question to go along with that, and then I think Jimmy's going to follow up. But is it fair to say that your primary concerns that you are addressing and the things that are bothering you are theological, But but with
Absolutely.
that, there are also secondary concerns that relate, but are not maybe immediately the theological, that are more social. For example, and maybe it's all theological, but maybe not first tier theological. Maybe that's a better way to say it. So, like intersectionality, by the way, which I reject on philosophical grounds to start with, but like intersectionality. Would you say it's possible for a believer to believe in intersectionality and be a healthy
Sure.
Christian? But it gets increasingly difficult to be a healthy believer if your belief about humanity or the gospel itself goes so far out the off of the biblical page that you're beginning to, I guess, more loosely hold orthodoxy, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it is theological for me, but ideas always have consequences.
Right.
And so where your theological commitments are laid out, there are going to be implications for good and or ill. And I do think that beyond the pure theological concerns are some implications that people are, or at least I'm seeing differently than those who seem to be advocating these philosophical positions that I disagree with. Are seeing them. For example, I hate racism. I've got a long history in my family with racial tension and issues, and I got lots of stories. According to some of my ancestors, there's no doubt I'm 1/4 Syrian, and I've been told I'm 1/8 American Indian, 1/8 African American. This has been a part of my family's
and anybody who knows you, Tom,
many.
I'm just going to go ahead and say this. Anybody who knows you knows your heart and your life as it relates to the issues of race and equality and all of that. So I just want to double down to say Tom is a lover of all people, of all neighbors, and is not in any way, shape, or form against.
Tom is down with minorities.
So no, I mean, we mean that seriously though, because I know you, and when there's a hint of now it comes out. It's like the implication is either whether it's by virtue of associating with somebody that they perceive to be more off page on the race issue than you. I get defensive about my friends. I do, but please go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
That's kind of, you may have just lost a bunch of friends by saying that. But what I'm going to do is take your words and turn them into a meme.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I think that some people wanting to help are actually doing great harm.
Yeah, that can happen.
Folks, if they say they will help. Yeah. I think that's happening on the issue of women. I think it's happening on the issue of the homosexual, LGBTQ plus, and I think it is happening in some ways on the racial issue as well. That we want to help these, we want to protect them, we want to lift them up, but the mechanisms that you are employing are guaranteed to keep them down, and are guaranteed to keep from them what would be most helpful. I mean, when you start telling homosexuals that they can maintain their homosexual lust and be faithful Christians, you're damning them. In essence. You're taking the gospel, the only thing that can help them, away from them. And I know it's all done in love, it's all done with good motives, but those good motives will take people to hell if they are not chastened by the word of God. And so that's what I'm seeing.
Right. So, Tom, I part of what the follow-up I wanted to kind of ask and kind of push on was, I love the motives. I think the heart behind it. I understand the desire to kind of help and to start the conversation. So I think along those lines, I think for me personally, one of the things about it that concerned me was the act of gathering signatures. It felt like, at least for me, it felt like rather than a conversation starter, it was more about drawing a line and gathering teams. And I obviously, that's me, reading,
Sure.
possibly, reading into things. And so I guess I just want to know I guess I would like clarity on the rationale behind asking people to sign the statement on, because as I look at it, I'm like, well, is this helpful or is this hurtful? And so just seeking clarity in that.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I thought much about it going into it on that aspect. It was just, I don't even know who came up with it or what. But anyway, the idea was, okay, we have a place for people to sign it.
Mm-hmm.
And other statements have done that, obviously, the Nashville statement.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wouldn't oppose to it. But I'll tell you something I think is very, very good that's come out of it is it's easy to ignore people whenever you can marginalize them and say, well, these are just the kooky cousins that we have in the family, and you just kind of acknowledge they're there, but you don't really pay attention to them or listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that has been done, was being done. And there were people who tried to talk us out of releasing the statement. I was told, well, this is before it went public at all. The list of signatories is very unimpressive, and nobody's going to pay attention to it. And it's just not going to get any traction, which, quite honestly, I didn't care. I mean, I really didn't care. But
if you're right, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was my attitude. But I have been blown away by the number of people who have signed it and some of the folks who have signed it. And we've been contacted, I have, and others that have been a part of this have reported being contacted by a lot of people saying, man, we agree with this. But we're in tough spots right now. We're in this institution. We're in this organization. I'm under this employment, and I just can't sign it. And that's between them and God. I've said to many of my friends, this is not a test of fellowship with me. If you don't sign this, it's not going to change one thing I think about you. But the fact that people have come out and signed it, the fact that Ligonier Ministries has come out and signed it as a ministry, I mean, that's significant. That tells you.
I've missed that. That's the most significant. Because I'll be honest. One of the things that I just noticed because I haven't gone through all the signatures is after the initial 15 or whatever, I didn't see anybody very, very few notable, broadly known people that I would be like, wow, like here's a seminary president, or here's a, here's a well-known author. I didn't see a lot of that. Very, very little, if any. But you're saying Ligonier. I mean, so who?
Ligonier.
So Ligonier. That is definitely a very big statement.
It's a big deal. And what it does is it signals much that's been going on that hasn't been out in the public, that's been under the surface. And again, I could write a book on the emails and phone calls, conversations I've had with people who are suffering under the nonsense that's going on in the name of a lot of the branches of so-called social justice. I mean, professors at respectable institutions, employees of well-known organizations, people in churches, pastors that have watched their churches be infected by some of the stuff that's being pumped out from some of these institutions and organizations, and things have blown up. I mean, it's crazy. I don't think I should tell you any of those specifics.
No, of course.
We'll wait till we turn off the mic.
Yeah, exactly. It'll just between them, God, and Al Mohler. I understand. Yeah.
But I tell you, it is frightening. I mean, it is something like you would expect out of places of secular institutions. Let me just give you one example. One Bible college or Christian college. Been in contact with several professors from there, and they have a walk of shame that their white students are to go through in order to get in touch with their white privilege. I've been told there's at least one other Christian academic institution that has something similar. They don't call it that. It's something similar. I mean, this is taking place.
So, and again, these are all issues that I love to explore. I said on a recent episode, Jimmy and I both, I think, believe that depending on how you define white privilege, we can say it's a real thing or it's total bogus. It's not a real thing. It really depends on how you define it. And so I know we can't go down all of those rabbit trails. Maybe we can have you back on for some of that.
Oh, I'd love that.
I do think they are important. But to what degree do you think it's helpful to explore one's own, as a nation or whatever, one's own history of failure? To what degree do you think that is helpful, and how is that? How can it be beneficial, and how can it turn harmful?
Well, I don't think we should be afraid of the truth, wherever it may lie or lead us. So if you're studying history, if you're wanting to understand the history of your nation or the history of your family or your own personal history, be honest. I think that's fine. I mean, the danger, it's not just fine, it's necessary. I mean, I don't think we should ever compromise with the truth. The danger is when we start making judgments based upon that honest assessment and go to unnecessary and even faulty conclusions from it.
Right.
That's happening a lot right now, quite honestly. If you want to, I've discovered and started reading Shelby Steele in the last year, who is just brilliant. And I commend his book, White Guilt. It is one of the finest treatments I've read that has given me clarity about what the 60s did to us on this whole racial issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, and not just that, but also on war, also on climate, economics. I mean, he's brilliant, and he lived through it, and he's an African-American guy. And so he's writing from that perspective. People will look at, for example, demographics in the Black community today in America. And they'll say, well, we had slavery, for 400 years or 300 years, we had slavery, and we had Jim Crow, and then we had the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Act, and we still are now dealing with all of the wickedness of those things. And that's why the Black family is in the condition it's in. Well, Tom Ascol, Shelby Steele say, no, not quite. Go back and look at what the Black family was like up until the early mid-60s. Mm-hmm. Look at what the Black family was like in terms of employment, in terms of the marriage rates in the early 20th century. If you're going to blame those causes, you're going to have to look at something far closer to the results than what is often flooding the narrative today. So I do think honesty is important, but once you look at the honest reality of what has been, and you start to extrapolate and say, therefore, this is why things are the way they are now, and this is what has to be done. Don't just accept people. Don't expect people just to stand by and say, oh, okay, you got your facts right historically. Therefore, the argument you're making about what is and what ought to be just has to be infallible. It's not, and it needs to be challenged, and it needs to be questioned. Mm. And whenever you get offended because somebody does question or challenge it, I think that reveals far more of what's going on than just trying to have an honest assessment of reality. Mm.
So, as this thing is playing out, mm-hmm. and the way that it's played out, and you look at the statement and what was articulated, signatures. I'll tell you where I'm at. I think the signatures. I get why I don't like the idea of signatures. I get the value that you articulated to say, hey, it lets people know that it's not just a bunch of unknown racists, that you might imagine. Right. So I get the value of that. I still don't like the idea of asking for signatures. Because I don't know that I have a better way.
Yeah, I
to
can't
bring
think
this
of a better
forward.
way, to be honest, yeah.
But that would be my desires for is there a better way? So maybe that's kind of fueling this question. But in looking at how this is played out, because I'll be honest, I've heard people that are for the statement and against the statement who are saying stupid things about the other people. Yeah. Like really stupid, unchristian things. And I think the best thing would be for me and Jimmy to smack them around a little bit. But anyway, in looking at how this is played out, would you have done everything that you've done so far with this statement in the same way? Or would you have made any changes, or would you have done anything differently to be even more effective?
Personally, I mean, I got into this personally when we met in Dallas. I think it was June 19th or sometime around then. None of us had ever been in the room together.
Right.
And people talk about, well, yeah, you're just a bunch of old white guys. There was a lot of diversity in that room, mm-hmm. regardless of the color of our skin. Sure. And that's what another thing people, diversity seems to mean only one thing today to people. And there's all kind of diversity. So it was interesting to be with brothers, some of whom I knew and many of whom I did not, but all of whom I had some reason to respect or have grown to respect, and to listen to them. If I were doing this by myself, it would be a different statement. If I were just writing this for Tom Ascol, it'd be, it would say things differently, no doubt. But it's a consensus statement. It's bringing people together who do have quite a bit of difference in the way we work out our theological constructs. and the way that we would even try to implement some of the ethical requirements of those constructs. So the fact that we all came together and could come up with a document that was a consensus that we could all agree to, I think was in one sense very healthy. I'm not a big signer of documents either. I mean, I just don't. I just don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of odd for me to be involved in this kind of effort. But given what was going on and what I've come to in my own thinking over the last year and a half, couple of years, and given where we were, I don't know of any alternative that could have been better. I mean, I personally reached out trying to have conversations with people, ask questions. It was just ignored.
Right.
And I'm not the only one in that room that had that experience as well. And so one of the things that has happened is that this issue is not going to be ignored anymore. And those who were just driving the train and saying, look at this, or we're going down this road, this is so good, we're just all celebrating all the great things that are happening, are finally being called to pause and acknowledge, you know what, there's a whole bunch of healthy, serious-minded evangelical churches and church leaders who are not convinced and have great concerns. And so if you're going to keep going that way, you're not going to be going with us. We're not riding that train. And that needs to happen.
One of the things, and maybe it's because of where Jimmy and I pastor, but our congregation is very diverse. We have people that voted for Hillary. God help them. We have people that voted for Trump.
Yep, MAGA.
God help them. And we have people that voted independent. God help them. So it's like we have a very diverse group of people. But here's what we know. We know, however misguided a decision might be in reality, that everyone is trying to follow Jesus. I mean, we really do believe that. We think they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to make sense of it. And I think that goes a long way when we're listening to the other side. Yeah. Right. If I can understand why they are viewing it something the way that they do, or articulating it, if I can actually, restate their view in a way that they can affirm, right? It's like Leighton Flowers. Hey, Leighton, we love you, bro, but you cannot state Calvinism. Okay, you cannot summarize Calvinism. You stink at summarizing Calvinism. You're terrible at it. So that's why we will always say, like, we can't agree, because you cannot do it. And maybe I couldn't do it if I had to restate dispensationalism. Maybe my prejudices would come out. But we need to be able to understand opposing views so well that we can, state them in a way that our opponents would say, yes, that is exactly what we believe. Okay, and then we understand it, and then we go from there. But why is there so much heat on both sides? I don't think it's just one side.
Yeah.
Why is there so much heat where it seems like a lot of people, like, if you can't sign that statement, then you're not a Christian? It's like, what? That's just crazy.
And we even saw comments like that on our posts about it. People saying, if you can't sign this, I mean,
you better have a darn good
reason for not being evangelical.
Like, I know Tom's not going to hate me if I don't sign it. Like, I know Tom and I are going to be brothers. We'll break bread. There's not going to be an issue.
I mean, I'm going fishing next weekend with Tom.
Well,
we're going to go
you
catch
ain't
the
going
marlin.
fishing. You don't even know how to fish.
I know how to fish. We're going to troll.
Okay, yeah, trolling. That's what you do.
That's what Tom and I do. We troll.
That's what BJ Smalls does. Is he trolls.
No.
He's a troller.
Tell him, Tom.
So, so I think that's really important that that we work hard to understand. What is something that you would want your opponents of the statement? They're not your opponents, but what is something that you would want the opponents of the statement to know about you, or about the writers of this statement? What are some things that you think are really important that maybe are misconstrued?
Well, I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know how to answer that. I mean,
I'll give you one example.
Okay.
If you need one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let me go to my notes. Hang on. I actually. I'll bring up the statement. Here we go. All right. So when we walked through it, we actually tried to be. We really did try. Maybe we didn't do a good job. We tried to be fair in our reading of the statement while having fun. Here's a statement on racism,
which actually, while you're looking that up, I know that Dr. Moeller, when he was talking at the chapel there, I know that section itself was one that he had that caused pause for him.
Okay, so we deny that systemic racism is in any way compatible with the core principles of historic evangelical convictions. Bada bam. That's so good. We deny that the Bible can be legitimately used to foster or justify partiality, prejudice, or contempt toward other ethnicities. Very good. And again, it's like you have to say legitimately, right? Like it's very carefully worded.
Absolutely.
We deny that the contemporary evangelical movement has any deliberate agenda to elevate one ethnic group and subjugate another. And we emphatically deny, now here's my question. We emphatically deny that lectures on social justice are as vital to the life and health of the church as the preaching of the gospel and the exposition of scriptures. Of course. Like, I'm going to agree with you on that. I think it's so well said. But I think people read this and maybe they don't read it carefully or fairly, and they think, oh, okay, so lectures on social issues are not helpful. And lectures, therefore, like when we engage in something like the abolition of abortion or slavery or whatever, like that's not valuable. Could you just speak to that? Because I think your perspective on that might help some of our listeners who really don't like this thing, because we have listeners on both sides.
Yeah.
I think you talking to that issue might help.
Yeah, well, it needs to be taken for what it says and not for what it doesn't say.
Right.
And that's fundamental. I would hope everyone would treat my words that way.
They're not going to do that, Tom.
Yeah,
they're not.
Tom,
they're not going to do that.
Even though you said as vital,
you're too
people
nice.
don't read people don't see the as vital.
Well, but I mean, I understand that quite well. But I can't make people. I can't answer questions that are not legitimately raised by what the words actually say. So I might be doing that all my life. However, I can say this. There are groups or churches that have MLK Day where they read his speeches, on their Sunday services. I mean, I think that's kind of not helpful.
I would agree.
That's not a good idea.
Yeah, I would agree.
So
it's not the preaching of the word. Yep.
Yeah. So, to study MLK and the impact he's had on this country and how God used him. Yeah. Praise God. God used Cyrus. God used Nebuchadnezzar. Praise God for all the ways that he's worked in history, and you can look at his providence and rejoice in it. So the concern all the way through this thing is to protect the gospel. And that's all that this statement does as well. Protect the gospel. The gospel alone deserves the pride of place in any kind of evangelical congregation.
And I think what's, even for me, inconsistent, not you, Tom, or the statement, but these same people that would be upset, I think some people, they like, I think the frustration for me is like when we have Pledge of Allegiance Sundays, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Exactly.
we're talking about the same thing here, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we're in agreement on, is that Sunday morning gathering is for the proclamation of Scripture, the proclamation of the Word of God to the people of God.
Yeah.
To the glory.
We're not going to be singing "Make America Great Again" anthms in our church.
Well, not every Sunday.
Okay? Not every.
Yeah.
It's got to space it out, Tom.
Any church should do that. Okay?
Right.
I don't think any church should do that.
Mm-hmm.
But people get upset. I mean, it's the same thing though. That Joe and Jimmy, we face this. Some Calvinists will read 1 John 2:2, and they'll spend more time saying what it doesn't say than they'll say that they do what it does say.
Calvinists are sometimes afraid to use the language of Scripture.
Exactly,
They're afraid to do it. Like that's just crazy.
So he's propitiation not only for our sins, but for the sins or for the whole world. Okay, John wrote that, Spirit inspired that. I'm not embarrassed by that.
Right, exactly.
But I'm not going to try to take it and say, well, what John really means here is no. Just take the words for what treat other people's words the way you want folks to treat your words.
Right.
That's what I would just appeal for that.
So, for the record, do you believe that for the record, because this is we are journalists, Tom.
Oh, yeah. Here we go, on the record, no spin zone.
So, do you believe the church should have a prophetic voice in the culture on issues of justice?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's. I just wanted you to say it because I know you do.
Yeah.
I know you do. But like people, I mean, listen, we are in a hyper tribalized culture right now. It is crazy. It is at times hilarious and at times just depressing and sad.
Yeah.
And so I want there to be conversations. I want us to be able to talk, and I want people to be able to say, "Hey, this is my perspective, and I don't hate you because of this, but this really does matter, and I think you need to agree with me. So let's talk about it." I don't know why we can't do that without completely demonizing a person or deifying a person?
Well, part of the reason we can't is because of the very things that we are trying to warn against in this document. It's the very way that our conversations are being shaped. And you have power, therefore, anything you say is just a power play. And I don't have power, therefore, anything I say is automatically legitimized. I mean, that's where we are today.
No, I hear you. And listen, Jimmy and I are never afraid to say what our perspective is. We like to let other people talk, and so like, I don't think that racism is everywhere. I just don't. I don't think, I don't think that.
Wait. What do you mean by, do you think that America has a systemic racism problem?
Systemic, that you got to define that word, because systemic would mean that it is so embedded in the government that that there is not, there is no possibility of equal opportunity.
Because and that you could be a racist. I mean, you probably are a racist, though you don't even know it, because you participate in the system.
Yeah, it's like, okay, listen, I hate racism. I hate abuse. I hate injustice. I genuinely do. Not enough, I'm sure. And I'm sure there are some forms of injustice that I'm probably more okay with than others, if I'm being honest. Right. Especially when it comes to like the torture of a terrorist. I'm probably okay with that, which is bad. It's a bad thing. It's a sinful thing.
We pray for Joe.
Pull off those toenails. Don't care. I had mine pulled off, so other people can have it done too. Anyway, a long story. What I would say though is I think we need to be unafraid to say, like, listen, I don't think a white straight man's perspective is any less valid than a black gay woman's perspective. I think that our perspectives are just that. They are perspectives, and they either correspond to truth and reality or they don't. And so let's just deal with people as individuals and deal with their arguments. So I think we need to be able to say stuff without fear of getting beat up. And maybe it's easy for me to say because I'm not going to get fired for that. I might get fired for being a jerk, but I'm not going to get fired for that stuff.
Whereas you're not going to get fired for being a jerk because, it's happened a few times.
I've been fired a few times?
No, you've been a jerk.
Yeah, I know. Well, eventually people's patience will run thin. So yeah, I want there to be, like, what we'd like to do is we'd like to have somebody else on to talk to them about their problems with this statement and to hear them. But Tom, what do you have? Because I don't know if you listened to our podcast. Did you listen to our podcast, Tom, on this issue?
Yeah, I did. I didn't get all the way through it. But
so you didn't listen to it. Okay,
I got tricked up on the comments. So
yeah. Hey, when I asked you if you could do anything over again, that's what you should have said. More consistent use of the Oxford comma, because somebody don't know what they're doing. Okay, so tell the truth, Tom. Who edited? Who gave approval of the final?
No, don't
edit?
do that to Tom.
Go ahead.
Don't do that to
Tom. Was it juicy?
No, don't do it.
It was juicy. That's okay.
I know, juicy boosy. It's okay.
Yeah, okay, it's all right. Hey. Work on your comma work, son. So
we actually sent it to Kate Turabian, and she signed off.
That's what you get for having a woman edit it.
No, stop it.
See
Joe.
what happens?
Stop it, Joe.
Jeez,
no,
I'll tell the truth.
No, you sent it to B&H Publishing. They edited it for you.
And then listen, B&H misses a lot.
They miss a lot.
There are more typos in B. They will never publish my book. Which is good because it means no typos. So many typos in B&H publications. Okay, so can you offer maybe some words to people on your side of the people that would sign this? Could you encourage them? Because some of them you have to see that some of them are not behaving well.
Yeah, they're pretty aggro.
So it's not all of them, it's just some of them. What would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, there are the radical fringe in any movement, and sadly, sometimes the radical fringe have the loudest voices. And that's unfortunate, but I've made it clear in several private conversations, I do not want to be identified with the loudest voices on our side that are in the radical fringe. That's not me, and it doesn't represent me. So don't take those words and apply them to me.
Right.
I would also say that, okay, those guys on our side, we're doing this because we believe in the gospel. We think the gospel is being threatened. We believe in the full authority, inerrancy, sufficiency of God's word. If that is true, then for somebody to tell Joe and Jimmy that if you don't sign this, then you're suspect about your commitment to Christ, you've just denied the sufficiency of Scripture that you say that you're advocating.
Right.
So we need to live by this very thing that we're calling people to. And that means there's going to be some differences of opinion. And we will have certainly many differences in terms of implication and application of the very things that we hold dear. And there will be some nuances, and there were in the room. I mean, there are in this document. As I said, if I were going to write it myself, it would be different at some points.
And that's something that we wrestled with a lot. We kept saying, like, listen, if I was writing it, I would say things differently. That's a given, right? That should be a given, because it's a group presentation.
Exactly. Just like Tom said, it's consensus.
Right. And it's like I always hated group presentations because I always felt like in seminary I could do better on my own than with these other guys in class working on my presentation. I didn't want to do it, but you work that we work that way for a lot of good reasons. So I think that there is the issue of, well, you could word it differently. And I think some of these issues are so complicated that the nature of the statement itself really can't deal with it. I mean, like when you're talking about like this issue of, say, for example, sexuality in marriage, complementarianism, race, ethnicity, and racism. Like those are such complicated big issues. You can only say so much in a statement like this. Mm-hmm. You're going to have an affirmation and you're going to have a denial. So I think both sides have to treat this statement as it's just that. It is a statement. It's not everything that can be said or should be said. So I think we need to both treat it with some generosity,
some graciousness,
recognizing like it can't say everything that needs to be said, and that's okay. It's okay that it can't say everything. Mm-hmm. I may not want to sign it because I don't think it says enough, or because I don't like the idea of signing it. I think because of the division issue, but again, like we said, like the most important sections in this we had nothing to say because it was so so good. And then the other parts that we talked about it was like, well, okay, so some of these things are they're really complicated and we might just want to have to word things differently. Yeah. But I think everybody can treat this thing more graciously than and maybe more, I don't know if the word is graciously, but both sides, some people on both sides tend to treat this thing as if it's attempting to say more than it can.
Yeah, and so Tom, as I'm sure you've been kind of, and if you can't think of one off the top of your mind, I understand that.
Tom can think of one off the top of his head.
I'm not going to
challenge him.
No,
he can do it.
Hold him to that. But I mean, as you kind of, reading through people's comments and responses, is there anyone in particular you're like, you know what, this is a pretty fair critique of the statement?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe there hasn't been one. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure there have been, but I'll tell you what I've overwhelmingly seen is that the statement has been criticized because of who it is that brought it forth. Number one, that's been a biggie.
We've seen that.
Because of what it doesn't say. It doesn't say this, or because the very worst possible reading, or at least a bad reading, is put upon the words rather than reading it graciously. I mean, good night. You guys have put enough words out. People can take you in the worst light,
right?
And then find multiple reasons to reject what you're saying, or they can give you the benefit of the doubt. Which love, I think, requires that we try to do that.
Yeah.
So I've had some good interactions with guys, but before the statement came out, as I was still trying to get my mind around a lot of this stuff, the BD Anyabwile had written a couple of articles during the MLK that created quite a dust storm. And, I was put off by some of the things that he said. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a response. I sent it to him. We had some back and forths in emails, and I love him, respect him deeply, and was helped by him. He helped me with the way I was thinking. He recommended some resources that have been beneficial to me to consider ideas that I hadn't considered before. So that was great. But that has been the minority report. I mean, overwhelmingly, that's not been the standard case. So I don't even engage most guys.
Right.
Just let it go.
Well, I have one more question. I don't know if Jimmy is any more.
Yep,
so
I'm good.
I asked, what you would say to the people on who signed it that are, going all rabid. What would you say? What would be your pastoral counsel to people who don't like the statement and are I don't think we're overreacting to it. And if we are, Tom, you press in, tell us that we're being big baby heads. That's fine. And I'll blame it on Jimmy. But I think for those that are overreacting to this statement, what would be your pastoral counsel to them?
Good question.
Same thing. I'd say, look, give the benefit of the doubt. Doesn't love require that we hope all things? And so you got at least some guys. I'll grant that overall it's an unimpressive list of signatories. Let's grant that. But you do have a John MacArthur who, love him, hate him, the guy's got a 50-year track record of faithfulness, and he's done much that is good for the kingdom. And so he deserves to be heard. He deserves to be given at least a fair hearing on these things. You have a Vodi Balcom who, good night, his story is so great, and God's used him in wonderful ways, and he has stood against the grain in many of the circles that he has found himself in over the course of most of his life. He deserves to be heard. You have Ligonier Ministries now with the long-standing faithful record on high that ministry has done, and they have seen this as an important and timely document to the degree that they actually affixed their name to it. So doesn't that deserve a hearing? If you're going to dismiss the document, at least do so with sufficient pause to recognize that there are some faithful brothers who see these things clearly enough to come out publicly and say these things. So I would think humility would dictate that I need to stop and listen and just think about it. May not agree, that's fine, but don't have a knee-jerk reaction that just dismisses it out of hand. To do that, it's more commentary on the person who does it than it is on the document itself.
That's really helpful, Tom. If you don't know, if you can't tell, we love you. We value you as a pastor, as a friend, as a theologian. Listen. All the guys that were on that team, there are guys that I'm like, I like some of what like MacArthur has had a great influence on me. I think he's just too cranky. And that's just me being honest. That guy needs to chill. But like you're a guy, like I think you are chill. I really do, and I love you and I appreciate you, and your family has just been so awesome to me over the years. So I appreciate your words, and I appreciate your efforts and your ministry. I'm really grateful for you, and I'm so thankful that you took the time to talk to us about this. I did have, as we're going out, if people want to follow you on, well, let me ask you this: what is let's be honest, what's your favorite Christian podcast hosted by two cigar smokers? Can you tell us what that would be?
Yeah, can you let us know that, Tom? You and Donna, what podcast do you and Donna listen to?
What podcast is the best with two guys that smoke cigars?
Including Doctrine and Devotion?
Yeah, you'd have to include Doctrine and Devotion in there.
Okay. Yeah, it would have to be Doctrine and Devotion.
Oh, there we go. Tom, that's so good. We'll expect you to leave a 5-star honest review on iTunes for us on that. Now, Tom, if people want to follow you on social media or unfollow you on social media because of your racism, how can they do that?
Let's see. On social media, I'm Tom Ascol.
Well, hang on a second, Tom. I'm sorry.
Stop it.
Is it at Tom Ascol?
At Tom Ascol.
Stop
You don't have a number in there?
Stop.
You don't have like an underscore 63 in there?
I don't have underscore. There is no underscore.
You put numbers in your stupid handle so nobody can remember it.
No, they can remember it.
Okay, so at
63.
Okay, nobody knows that. At Tom Ascol. Follow Tom. And Tom, your book, where you opened up a can on traditionalism.
Oh my goodness!
You're so
Tom.
nice. It's not a can of you know what. But it was so good. We loved it so much. We're so grateful. And by the way, Founders turned it up.
Oh goodness!
Founders turned it up. Was that like a year or two ago? Founders is all. I love Founders. I've been a Founders guy since 94, 95?
1894, yeah.
Founders turned it up, man. You guys are killing it with some great stuff. We love Founders, so we're thankful for that ministry. Everybody check out founders.org. We'll link to all of this in the show notes.
Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, enjoy your Saturday. And thanks again for hanging out with us. And let me just apologize now in advance for anything Jimmy might have said that embarrassed you.
Yeah, let Donna know. Go ahead and prepare the room. I'll be in the guest room next weekend.
Very good. We're looking forward to it.
Sounds good. If you guys want to join the conversation, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Doc and Devo, or on Facebook /Doctrine and Devotion. You can head on the website, doctrinedevotion.com. There you can contact us. You can sign up for the email blast or hit up the store, jofostore.com, and grab some gear. We've got the Doctrine and Devotion Conference happening next year. What is it, Joe? May 3rd
and 4th. Yep.
Oh, man, it's going to be great. We've got Dr. James Hamilton.
Biblical Theology.
It is going to be amazing. So head on to the website /conference and Register today. Fresh pod every Monday and Thursday, blog posts on Wednesdays, video content when available. Later.